Wait, you're putting that inside me? The Apache woman froze as the cowboy tried to save her life. The sun was burning hot over the wide, dry desert, making the sand shimmer like gold. The air was heavy with heat, and a lonely wind stirred the few scraggly bushes that grew stubbornly among the rocks. Far away, a small group of Apache people moved cautiously across the desert floor, their figures blending into the dusty horizon. Among them was Ahuli, a young woman with sharp eyes and long dark hair tied back in a braid. She walked carefully, her steps uneven, one leg dragging slightly behind the other. Ahuli's mind was racing. She had been bitten by a snake earlier in the day while gathering water near a hidden stream. At first, she had tried to hide the pain, thinking she could make it back to the camp without anyone noticing. But as the venom spread through her body, weakness took over, and each step became heavier than the last. She knew she had to keep moving, but her strength was fading fast. The desert around her was both beautiful and dangerous. Rocks jutted out like broken teeth, and the sun beat down relentlessly. A hawk circled above, its sharp cries cutting through the silence. Ahuli had grown up in these lands, knowing every rock, every twist in the path, every danger hidden in the sand. But this time, she felt a fear unlike anything she had felt before. This was not a battle she could fight with skill or speed. This was a fight against something invisible, creeping through her veins, and she had no weapon to defend herself. A distant sound broke through the quiet. The faint crunch of hooves against the hard-packed sand made her freeze. She squinted into the heat haze and saw a lone figure on horseback, moving steadily toward her. The figure was that of a cowboy, dressed in worn leather, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face. His horse was strong and healthy, moving with purpose through the rough terrain. Ahuli instinctively ducked behind a boulder, trying to hide, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew the history between her people and the settlers. Strangers were dangerous, and trust could be deadly. The cowboy slowed his horse as he got closer, raising a hand to signal that he meant no harm. "Hey, you all right?" he called out, his voice calm but rough from the desert wind. Ahuli's breath caught in her throat. She did not answer, her eyes fixed on him, every muscle in her body tense. She wanted to move, to run, but her legs were weak, almost refusing to obey. Luke, that was his name, though she did not know it yet, dismounted carefully, keeping his hands visible and his movements slow. He had been traveling alone for days, carrying only what he could fit on his horse. But something about the way he looked at her told him she needed help. He had seen the subtle signs of danger before, the way she was limping, the way her face was pale, the faint tremor in her hands. He knew it was serious. Ahuli's fear was palpable. Every instinct told her to hide, to run, to protect herself. But as she tried to move, her legs gave way, and she collapsed against the rough sand. Pain shot through her body, sharp and unforgiving, and she gasped. Luke rushed to her side, crouching down carefully. "It's all right," he said gently, his voice steady. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're hurt, but I can help." Ahuli shook her head weakly, her dark eyes wide with fear. She wanted to scream, to tell him to go away, but her body betrayed her. The venom was already spreading, making her vision blur. Luke noticed the bite mark on her leg, partially hidden beneath her clothing. It was a small mark, but he could tell the danger it posed. He had seen snake bites before, and he knew that if he didn't act quickly, she could die. He rummaged through his saddlebag, pulling out a small, worn kit. Inside were the few tools he had for emergencies: bandages, bottles of clear liquid, and some crude instruments made for first aid. Luke worked quickly but carefully, speaking to her in broken Spanish and English. "You're going to be okay. he said. "I need to help you now. It might hurt, but it's the only way." Ahuli froze, staring at the objects in his hands. She did not understand what he was about to do, and the fear in her eyes was clear. "Wait, you're putting that inside me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Luke paused, looking at her calmly. "Yes," he said softly. "It's the only way to stop the venom."
I need you,
She wanted to refuse, to pull away, but every passing second made her weaker. She could feel the venom creeping further, making her limbs heavy and slow. She realized she had no choice. Slowly, reluctantly, she nodded. Luke gave her a small, reassuring smile and began the process. The desert seemed to hold its breath as he worked. Every movement was deliberate, careful, and precise. He explained what he was doing as he went along, his voice calm and steady. "This might hurt," he said. "I need to remove the poison." "Stay still, all right?" Ahuli nodded again, gripping the sand beneath her hands. Her pulse raced, and sweat ran down her face. The pain was sharp, but she knew it was necessary. As Luke worked, he noticed her eyes flicking to the horizon, to the rocks and the heat, as if searching for danger even in this moment of vulnerability. He understood that her fear was not just about him. It was about survival, about everything she had been taught to protect herself against. He spoke gently. "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." Hours seemed to stretch into one long, tense moment. The desert sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the sand. Ahuli's breathing slowed, though her body still trembled. She began to feel some relief as the venom's effects slowed. Her trust in this stranger, this cowboy, grew slowly, carefully. She did not know his intentions fully, but she could see that he had risked much to help her, even if it was just his own courage and knowledge against the harshness of the desert. Finally, Luke finished his work, applying bandages and giving her water from a small canteen. Ahuli's strength was still limited, but the worst seemed to be over. She sat on the sand, exhausted, looking at it with a mixture of fear, relief, and curiosity. He gave her a faint nod, signaling that the immediate danger had passed. The desert around them was quiet again, the wind shifting the sand in small waves. A hawk circled above, its cries echoing through the heat. Ahuli realized that she had survived, not by her own skill alone, but with the help of someone she had been ready to distrust completely. Luke sat nearby, resting against a rock, keeping an eye on her. Both of them were aware of the fragile balance between danger and safety, trust and fear, life and death. For Ahuli, the desert no longer felt as endless or merciless. For Luke, the encounter had changed something inside him, a reminder that courage was not always about fighting or winning, but sometimes about patience, care, and understanding. In the harsh, unforgiving desert, two lives had crossed paths, bound together by fear, pain, and the need to survive. As the sun continued its slow descent, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Ahuli leaned back, letting the warmth of the rocks seep into her tired body. Luke watched the horizon, knowing the road ahead was long and uncertain, but feeling a quiet satisfaction that he had done what he could to save a life. And in that vast, empty desert, for a brief moment, fear was replaced by a fragile, newfound trust. Ahuli's body trembled as the initial pain of the venom slowly eased. She could feel her heartbeat in her chest, slow and heavy, reminding her that she had survived, but only barely. The desert around her seemed both endless and silent, stretching far beyond where her eyes could see. The wind whispered across the sand, carrying tiny grains that clung to her damp skin. Even though she was alive, she could not stop the shaking in her limbs. Her gaze flicked toward Luke, who sat calmly nearby, his horse grazing quietly not far away. Luke had been watching her carefully. He knew survival in the desert was not just about immediate danger. The after effects of a snake bite could be as deadly as the bite itself. He gently handed her more water from his canteen. "Drink slowly," he said. "It will help your strength come back." Ahuli took the water in small sips, her hands still unsteady. Each swallow felt like a victory, each heartbeat a reminder that she had been given a chance. Even as her body tried to recover, her mind refused to rest. Memories of the snake's sudden strike came back in flashes. The hiss, the sharp pain, the panic that had surged through her. Fear had frozen her in place at first, and she realized how close she had come to death. She looked at Luke again, trying to read him, trying to understand why a stranger had risked so much for her. His expression was calm, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes, a determination that went beyond words. "You're safe now," Luke said softly, noticing the tension still lingering in her body. "You don't have to hide or be afraid." Ahuli nodded slowly. The words sounded strange coming from him, but somehow they carried weight. The desert had taught her to trust very few people, and even fewer strangers. Yet, she felt a cautious curiosity forming inside her. They both remained quiet for a while, the silence only broken by the occasional rustle of the wind or the soft chewing of Luke's horse. The stillness of the desert made her feel small and fragile, but it also made her feel alive in a way that the chaos of life in the camp never did. She could sense the danger lurking everywhere, but for the first time since the bite, she felt a thread of control, tenuous but real.
Luke spoke again, breaking the silence.
You need to get back to your people, he said. They'll be worried.
Ahuli's stomach twisted. Returning to her group was necessary, but the thought of moving with her weak leg terrified her. She wasn't sure she could walk far. The venom had left her joints stiff, and her body still ached from the ordeal. I don't know if I can," she admitted quietly, the words heavy on her tongue. Luke studied her for a moment and nodded. "We'll take it slow," he said. "I'll help you."
You won't be alone. Ahuli hesitated.
The offer was generous, but trust was not something easily given. She had grown up hearing stories of settlers who brought harm instead of help. Yet in that moment, she realized she had little choice. She could try to walk alone and risk another attack or collapse, or she could accept his help and hope that he was telling the truth. Slowly, with Luke supporting her under her arm, Ahuli began to stand. Pain shot through her leg, sharp and unforgiving, but she gritted her teeth and pushed herself forward. Each step was a struggle, her body trembling with effort. Luke's presence beside her was steady, a reassuring anchor in the chaos of her fear and weakness. Together they moved across the uneven desert floor, the sun dipping lower, casting long shadows behind them. As they walked, Luke kept the conversation gentle and calm. "Do you have a name?" he asked. Ahuli hesitated, then answered softly,
Ahuli.
"I'm Luke." The exchange was simple, yet it carried a weight neither of them had expected. Names were more than words. They were a bridge of recognition, a small acknowledgement of humanity amidst fear. Ahuli's trust grew slowly as they moved, step by step. Luke pointed out hazards along the path, sharp rocks, loose sand, and even a few desert snakes hidden in the shadows. His knowledge of the land impressed her. Despite being a stranger, he understood the desert in ways she had never encountered outside her people. It was strange and unsettling to realize that someone from another world, another way of life, could navigate this land so skillfully. Hours passed, the sun sank lower, and the desert began to cool. Shadows stretched across the sand, and the wind carried a chill that hinted at the coming night. Ahuli's energy was fading, but she refused to stop. Every step was an effort, yet she continued, driven by the need to reach her people and the quiet reassurance of Luke's presence. Suddenly, movement in the distance caught her eye. A coyote, low to the ground, slinking between rocks. Fear surged in her chest, but Luke's calm voice stopped her panic. "It's fine," he said. "It's not interested in us. Just keep moving." The words grounded her, reminding her that panic could be as dangerous as the venom had been. By late afternoon, they came upon a small wash, a dry creek bed that offered slightly easier terrain to traverse. Ahuli sank to the ground for a moment, exhausted, leaning against a rock. Luke knelt beside her, offering water and a few words of encouragement. "You're doing good," he said. "Almost there." She nodded, grateful for his steady presence. The desert had been cruel, but with him, she felt a fragile hope returning. During this time, she began to observe him more closely. Luke was rough and weathered, his hands calloused from years of work with horses and tools. His hat was worn, leather creased and sun-bleached, yet there was a gentleness in his movements, a patience that seemed almost unnatural for someone so hardened by life on the frontier. Ahuli realized that courage could take many forms, not just the courage to fight, but the courage to care, to act, and to stay calm when others might panic. As the sun dipped closer to the horizon, Luke finally pointed toward a faint trail in the distance. "That's the path to your camp," he said. Relief flooded through Ahuli, but it was mixed with fatigue. Her body ached, and every step now required willpower more than strength. Luke supported her, holding her steady as they moved carefully along the uneven path. Night began to fall, the sky painted with streaks of orange, pink, and purple. The desert cooled rapidly, and Ahuli shivered despite her exhaustion. Luke draped a light blanket from his saddle over her shoulders. "It's not much, but it will help," he said. Ahuli felt a flicker of gratitude. Even in the harsh, unforgiving desert, small acts of care mattered immensely. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of slow, careful movement, they began to hear faint voices in the distance. Ahuli's heart lifted. Her people were nearby. She could see the flicker of a small fire, smoke curling gently into the darkening sky. Relief and anticipation mingled with lingering fear. She was still weak, still vulnerable, but she had survived and she had not been alone. As they approached the camp, Ahuli's people emerged cautiously, their expressions a mix of worry and relief. They paused when they saw Luke at her side, their hands hovering near weapons but not moving. Luke raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "She's safe now," he said softly. "She needed help." That's all. Ahuli's parents rushed forward, gathering her into their arms. Their relief was palpable, tears glistening in their eyes. Ahuli sank into their embrace, exhausted but alive. Luke stood quietly to the side, watching the reunion with a quiet satisfaction. He had done what he could. He had risked the desert, the unknown, and the fear of mistrust to save a life. The firelight flickered across the camp, casting long shadows and highlighting the tension that still lingered in the night air. Ahuli looked up at Luke one last time before her parents guided her to the shelter of their tents. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. Fear had turned into trust. Pain had turned into survival. and strangers had briefly become allies in the harsh, unforgiving world of the desert. As Luke mounted his horse and prepared to leave, he glanced once more at Ahuli and her family. He did not expect gratitude or friendship. He only hoped that she would survive, that she would heal, and that this brief crossing of paths had made a difference. The desert was vast, wild, and dangerous, but for a moment, courage, trust, and human care had shaped a different story, one of survival against the odds. Ahuli sat quietly in the shadow of the small tent, her body still weak and aching from the snakebite. The firelight from the camp flickered across her face, casting dancing shadows that made her surroundings look alive. Her parents hovered nearby, speaking softly to the others about what had happened, but their words felt distant to her. She could still feel the sting of fear lingering in her body, the kind that did not leave immediately even when danger had passed. The venom had been removed, but her body was tired, her muscles stiff, and every movement reminded her of how fragile she had been. Luke had ridden away shortly after bringing her to the camp. She had wanted to thank him properly, to tell him that she trusted him, but he had simply nodded and left. The desert was his world, and she knew he had his own path to follow. Still, his presence left a strange emptiness, a feeling that someone who cared had been there and then vanished into the horizon. The night was quiet, but not peaceful. Ahuli's mind replayed the events of the day in vivid detail: the strike of the snake, the burning pain, her legs giving way under her weight, and the calm, steady hands of the cowboy as he worked to save her. She realized that fear could freeze a person, but courage, quiet, patient, and careful, could bring them back from the edge of death. As she tried to rest, her body protested. Her muscles ached, her stomach twisted from the venom's effects, and a deep exhaustion weighed on her. She could hear the faint sounds of the camp around her, the crackle of the fire, whispers of people talking, the occasional murmur of a horse shifting in its tether. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to find calm, but every sound made her flinch slightly. Survival had a cost, and she could feel it in every fiber of her body. The next morning, the desert greeted her with its harsh, unyielding brightness. Sunlight poured through the open flaps of the tent, warming the sand and rocks, but also reminding her of the dangers that still lurked outside. Ahuli rose slowly, her movements careful, and stepped into the light. Her leg was sore, and every step sent a reminder of her fragility. She had survived, but the journey back to full strength would not be simple. Her parents watched her closely, worry etched into their faces. "You must rest more," her mother said softly. "You cannot move too quickly." Ahuli nodded, understanding the wisdom in the words, but she could not stay still for long. She felt a strange restlessness, a need to understand what had happened, to confront the fear that had frozen her in place. She wandered slightly from the camp, moving toward the rocks and dunes she had passed the day before. The desert was beautiful in its harshness, with shadows stretching long in the morning light, and a wind that carried the faint scent of sage and dust. Every step was cautious, her body still weak, but her mind was alert. She thought about the cowboy Luke and the strange courage he had shown. He had acted without hesitation, without expectation, simply to save a life. It was something she had rarely seen, and it left a deep impression on her. As she walked, she noticed the subtle signs of the desert, the tracks of animals, the way the wind shaped the sand, the movement of small lizards across the rocks. She realized that danger was everywhere, but so was life. The desert had a rhythm, a balance between risk and survival, fear and strength. Ahuli felt herself learning from it in a way she never had before. Suddenly, a movement caught her eye. A small group of crows circled above, their harsh calls echoing across the desert. Ahuli paused, heart racing. Her mind flashed back to the moment of the snake bite, to the fear and weakness that had almost ended her life. But she took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had survived, she had endured, she had learned. The desert had tested her, and she had passed, not alone but with the help of someone who had believed she could. Returning to the camp, Ahuli found that the group was preparing to move. Food and water were being packed, and the adults were discussing the best route for the day. Her parents called her over, and she felt a wave of warmth at being needed and included again. "You are stronger than you realize," her father said, his voice firm but kind. Ahuli nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. Ahuli nodded. She had learned something fundamental about survival. Strength was not only in the body, but in the mind, in trust, and in the courage to accept help when needed. As the day progressed, Ahuli began to regain more of her strength. She walked with careful steps, her body adjusting to the strain. Luke's words from the day before echoed in her mind. "You're doing good." Almost there, she realized that courage could take many forms, from helping others to trusting them, to moving forward even when fear still lingered. The desert was still harsh, but she felt a newfound connection to it, a sense of understanding and respect. Later that evening, Ahuli sat by the fire watching the stars appear one by one in the clear desert sky. The night was calm now, the wind gentle and the air cool. Her body was tired, but her mind was awake and alert. She thought about Luke, about his calm presence and his patience. She realized that the events of the past 2 days had changed her in ways she could not yet fully understand. Fear had been replaced with a cautious confidence, weakness with resilience. She had faced death and survived, and that survival had given her a quiet strength she had never known before. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sounds of movement nearby. One of the younger members of the group had wandered too close to the rocks, and Ahuli rose quickly to guide them back. She felt a sense of responsibility, a need to protect and lead in some small way. The snake bite and the desert had taught her that life was precious and fragile, and that strength often came from unexpected places, from others, from the land, and from within herself. As the night deepened, Ahuli finally allowed herself to rest fully. She lay on the warm sand, listening to the soft crackle of the fire and the distant calls of desert animals. Her body was still sore, but her mind felt lighter. The danger had passed, and she had learned important lessons about trust, courage, and the delicate balance between fear and action. She knew the desert would continue to test her, as it tested all who lived within it, but she felt a quiet readiness for what lay ahead. By the next morning, Hauli's strength had improved enough for her to take more active steps in the group's journey. She walked alongside the adults, helping to guide the younger members and carrying supplies when she could. Each step was a reminder of her survival, each movement a testament to the courage she had learned from Luke's calm guidance. The desert remained challenging, but she no longer felt as helpless. She had seen what fear could do, and she had seen what courage could do, and she knew the difference. As the group moved through the rocky terrain, Ahuli's thoughts returned once more to Luke. She wondered where he had gone, what paths he followed through the vast desert. She hoped that he was safe, that he continued to help others in the ways he had helped her. Though their encounter had been brief, it had left a lasting impression. She realized that sometimes the most important lessons came not from your own actions, but from the quiet courage of someone else. The day stretched on, and the sun climbed high in the sky, hot and relentless. Ahuli's body was stronger now, but she remained cautious. She knew the desert could be unforgiving, that danger could appear at any moment. Yet she moved with a new sense of awareness, a careful confidence that came from having faced death and lived. The snakebite had been a turning point, a moment of fear transformed into survival through trust and courage. By late afternoon, the group found a small oasis, a place with shade, fresh water, and enough food to rest and recover. Ahuli sank to the ground, feeling the cool grass and water soothe her tired body. She watched the sky, thinking about the vastness of the desert and the fragile threads that connected life and survival. She understood now that courage could be found in unexpected places, in the calm hands of a stranger, in the careful steps you took, and in the willingness to trust when it mattered most. As night fell again, Ahuli lay near the water, listening to the quiet sounds of the desert. The stars sparkled above, and the cool air carried the scent of sage and sand. She felt a deep gratitude for life, for the lessons learned, and for the strange, quiet hero who had helped her when she was most vulnerable. The desert had tested her, yes, but it had also shown her what it meant to survive, to trust, and to find courage even in fear. The sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the rocks and sand in shades of gold and pink. Ahuli stood at the edge of the small oasis, her eyes scanning the horizon. The morning air was cool, a welcome change from the harsh heat of the previous day. Even though her body was stronger now, she knew the desert could turn dangerous in an instant. Each sound, each shadow could signal trouble. Her muscles were still sore, but she moved with more confidence, aware of every step and every obstacle in her path. The group had begun to prepare for the day's journey. Supplies were packed carefully, water skins filled, and food secured. Ahuli helped where she could, lifting lighter bundles, guiding the younger children, and keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. Though she was recovering, she felt a new sense of responsibility. Survival was not only about protecting herself, it was about ensuring the safety of others. As the group moved away from the oasis, the desert seemed to stretch endlessly before them. The wind had picked up, carrying clouds of fine sand that stung their skin and made the path ahead harder to see. Ahuli's heart quickened with a mix of excitement and unease. The desert had tested her before, and she knew it would do so again. She felt the weight of her earlier experience, the snakebite, the fear, and the help she had received from Luke, and it guided her now. She moved carefully, listening to the sounds of the sand shifting underfoot, reading the signs of the desert like a language she had begun to understand. By mid-morning, the group encountered a section of rocky cliffs that forced them to climb carefully. The path was narrow, with steep drops on one side, and Ahuli felt a surge of fear. One wrong step could send her tumbling down the rocks. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, recalling how she had learned to trust not just her strength, but the support of others. Her parents stayed close, and other adults guided the children along the path. Each step was deliberate, slow, and careful. Ahuli felt her pulse racing, but she moved steadily, refusing to let fear control her. Halfway along the path, a sudden sound broke the tense silence, a low, growling noise echoing from the rocks above. Ahuli froze. Her mind raced with possibilities, a coyote, a mountain lion, or some other desert predator. She glanced around at the others. They had noticed it too, and a hush fell over the group. The adults moved instinctively to shield the children, positioning themselves between the noise and the younger members. Ahuli's stomach twisted. Danger was always present in the desert, and it often arrived without warning. The noise grew closer, a low, steady growl that made the hairs on Ahuli's arms stand on end. She took another deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. Panic would make her weaker, slow her reactions. and put others at risk. She focused on each movement, each step, as the group edged forward cautiously. The sound eventually revealed itself to be a lone mountain lion, circling above the rocks, curious but cautious. Its golden eyes followed their movements, muscles tensing as it assessed whether they were a threat or prey. Ahuli's heart pounded in her chest, but she stayed still, moving only when guided by the adults. Her parents whispered advice, telling her to watch the animal carefully and to trust the guidance of those experienced in the desert. Each step was measured, careful, deliberate. The mountain lion eventually lost interest, slipping silently back into the shadows. Relief washed over Ahuli, but she knew the desert would continue to challenge them. This was only one of many dangers they could face. By afternoon, the group had reached a dry riverbed, a wide path filled with stones and sand. The sun blazed overhead, and Ahuli could feel fatigue returning. She took a brief rest, sitting on a flat rock, and drank water slowly. The others also paused, tending to small injuries, adjusting packs, and offering words of encouragement. The desert could be exhausting, but it was also teaching them resilience, patience, and teamwork. Each person relied on the others, and Ahuli realized the strength in these connections. As they continued, dark clouds began forming on the horizon. A desert storm was approaching. Wind picked up, carrying dust and grit that stunned their faces and eyes. Ahuli's stomach tightened with concern. Storms in the desert could be dangerous, with sudden rain causing flash floods and strong winds toppling loose rocks. The group quickened their pace, looking for shelter wherever possible. Ahuli helped guide the younger children, her own strength and confidence growing as she moved. She had survived snakebite and exhaustion, and now she faced the storm with determination. Suddenly, the wind shifted violently, blowing sand into their faces. Visibility dropped, and movement became difficult. Ahuli felt the sting of grains against her skin, and the children began to cry out in fear. The adults gathered the group tightly, forming a protective circle. Ahuli stayed close to her parents, her eyes scanning for danger. Every step was harder, every breath more urgent. The storm tested their patience, strength, and coordination. As the storm raged, the group spotted a shallow cave in the side of a rocky hill. They hurried toward it, shielding the children and helping one another over rocks and loose sand. Ahuli's legs ached, but she pushed forward. The cave offered a temporary refuge from the storm, the walls providing protection from wind and flying debris. Everyone huddled together, wet and exhausted, but safe for the moment. Inside the cave, the air was cooler and quieter. Ahuli took a seat on a flat rock, shivering from the wind and exertion. The group began tending to each other, offering water, blankets, and gentle reassurance. Ahuli's parents wrapped a cloth around her shoulders, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that survival in the desert was never a solitary effort. Strength came not just from the body, but from trust, teamwork, and care for one another. Hours passed as the storm continued outside. Ahuli listened to the wind howl and the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. She reflected on the events of the past days, the snakebite, Luke's calm intervention, the struggles of the journey, and now the storm. Fear had been a constant companion, but courage had been there too, often quietly, guiding each decision and action. She realized that courage could take many forms, standing tall in the face of danger, helping others, or even asking for help when needed. As night fell, the storm began to ease, the wind subsided, and the air cooled. Ahuli stepped outside the cave carefully, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The desert looked different after the storm. Sand was shifted, rocks glistened with moisture, and the wind carried a fresh scent. The world felt alive again, renewed by the storm's passage. Ahuli took a deep breath, feeling a quiet connection to the land and the challenges it presented. The group resumed their journey the next morning, the desert calm and still. Ahuli walked with a new sense of awareness and strength. Every step reminded her of the danger they had faced and the courage required to survive. The events of the past days had shaped her, showing her that survival was not only about avoiding danger, but about understanding it, learning from it, and relying on others when necessary. By midday, they reached a small plateau with a wide view of the surrounding desert. Ahuli looked out at the vast landscape, feeling both humbled and empowered. She thought of Luke, the cowboy who had saved her life, and the lessons he had shown without words: patience, calmness, and quiet courage. She understood now that survival was not about fear or strength alone, but about understanding, trust, and action. Ahuli realized that the desert had changed her. She was no longer the fearful young woman who had struggled under the weight of venom and exhaustion. She had faced danger, survived, and learned the value of courage and trust. Each challenge had been an opportunity to grow, to understand herself, and to see the importance of human connection. As they continued down the plateau, the group encountered a series of small hills and ridges. Ahuli helped guide the children, pointing out stable rocks and safe paths. Her confidence grew with each careful step. She understood that every challenge, every obstacle was part of the journey, and that courage was a skill honed through experience and action. By late afternoon, they reached a sheltered valley where the group could rest and prepare for the night. Ahuli sat near the fire, exhausted but proud. She had faced the storm, the snake bite, and the challenges of the desert, and she had survived. The desert was still vast and dangerous, but she felt stronger, wiser, and more connected to the world around her. As night fell, Ahuli looked up at the stars, remembering Luke and the courage he had shown. She knew that life was fragile, but that survival, trust, and courage could carry a person through the hardest challenges. The desert had tested her, but it had also taught her what it meant to be strong, to be patient, and to care for others, even in the face of fear. The desert morning was calm and bright, the sun casting soft light over the valley where Ahuli and her people had spent the night. She awoke slowly, feeling the stiffness in her body from the long days of travel and the lingering effects of the snakebite. Yet, for the first time in days, she also felt something new, a sense of peace and confidence. The storm had passed, the dangers of the desert had been faced, and she had survived. Her body was still recovering, but her spirit felt stronger, steadier, and more alert than ever. Ahuli stepped out of the tent, the warmth of the sun on her face easing the aches in her muscles. Around her, the camp was busy with activity. The adults were preparing food and organizing supplies, while the children played cautiously near the rocks, their laughter a light, comforting sound in the quiet desert morning. She watched them for a moment, a smile touching her lips. Life went on, even in the harshness of the desert. Survival was not only about enduring danger, but also about finding moments of calm and joy, no matter how small. Her parents approached, their expressions softened by relief and pride. "You are stronger than we knew," her father said, his voice filled with quiet admiration. "You faced fear, and you did not falter." Ahuli nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She had learned more in these few days than in many years before. Lessons about courage, trust, patience, and the importance of human connection. The desert had tested her body and mind, but she had discovered a strength she did not know she possessed. The group began to move again, following the winding path through the valley. Ahuli walked steadily, careful with each step, but confident in her ability to navigate the terrain. The desert, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now felt more like a teacher. Every rock, every dune, every shift of the wind was a lesson in survival, resilience, and awareness. She realized that the land demanded respect, and she had begun to understand it in a way that went beyond skill or instinct. As they traveled, Ahuli thought often of Luke, the cowboy who had saved her life. She wondered where he was now, what path he followed across the vast desert. She remembered his calm voice, the patience in his hands, and the quiet courage that had guided him. She realized that true courage was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and persistent, like the care he had shown her when she had been most vulnerable. That thought gave her comfort, a reminder that even in the harshest moments, acts of courage and kindness could leave a lasting mark. By midday, the group reached a plateau overlooking a wide stretch of desert. The view was breathtaking. Rolling dunes stretched as far as the eye could see, interspersed with rocky outcrops and distant mesas. Ahuli paused for a moment, taking in the beauty of the landscape. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for her survival, for the lessons she had learned, and for the people who had guided and protected her along the way. Life in the desert was harsh and unpredictable, but it had also given her clarity, perspective, and a newfound respect for the delicate balance between danger and safety. As they descended from the plateau, a soft wind carried the scent of sage and dry earth. Ahuli moved carefully, helping the younger children over rocks and pointing out unstable ground. Her confidence had grown, and she felt a quiet pride in her ability to guide others. She realized that survival was not only about protecting oneself, but also about protecting others. The lessons she had learned from fear and vulnerability had transformed into knowledge, responsibility, and empathy. Late in the afternoon, the group reached a narrow canyon that led to a small stream, a place of fresh water and safety. Ahuli approached the water and knelt to drink, the cool liquid easing the dryness in her throat and the stiffness in her muscles. Around her, the camp began to settle for the night. Fires were lit, supplies were organized, and the children laughed and played quietly. Ahuli felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. She had survived snakebite, exhaustion, storms, and the challenges of the desert, and now she could finally rest and recover fully. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple, Ahuli reflected on the journey. She thought about fear, how it had gripped her when the snake struck, when the storm raged, and when the mountain lion had growled from the rocks. She also thought about courage, the quiet, steady courage that Luke had shown, the bravery of her parents and the adults in the group, and the small acts of courage she had discovered within herself. She realized that courage was not about absence of fear, but about facing fear with careful action, trust, and awareness. Night fell, and the desert cooled. Ahuli sat near the fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the soft murmurs of her people. The stars above were brilliant, scattered across the sky in countless numbers. The desert felt alive with the quiet rhythm of night, the soft rustle of animals, the distant howl of a coyote, the whisper of wind through the rocks. Ahuli felt connected to it all, aware of both her smallness and her strength. She had survived, and she had learned to respect the desert as a teacher, guide, and sometimes harsh guardian. As she lay down to sleep, Ahuli thought of Luke once more. She wished she could see him again, to tell him how much his calm courage had meant to her and how it had changed her perspective on trust and survival. She knew that their paths might never cross again, but the lessons he had taught her, without words, through action and presence, would remain with her forever. Survival was more than just enduring danger. It was learning from those who showed courage and passing that knowledge on through careful action and awareness. The next morning, Ahuli woke with renewed energy. Her body had recovered further and her mind was sharp and alert. The group prepared to continue their journey and she moved with confidence, helping to lead the way through the uneven terrain. The desert remained challenging, but she now faced it with a steady heart, a clear mind, and the lessons of courage, trust, and patience guiding each step.
As they traveled, Ahuli noticed subtle changes in the landscape.
The rocks were smoother here, the sand firmer, and the wind gentler. She understood that the desert was full of secrets and subtle signs, hidden dangers and safe paths intertwined. Each observation, each careful movement strengthened her confidence and awareness. She realized that survival required constant attention, adaptability, and respect for the land and its unpredictable rhythms. By midday, the group reached a small mesa where they paused to rest and eat. Ahuli sat quietly, reflecting on the journey. She thought about her fear, her exhaustion, and the moments of courage that had brought her through. She realized that survival was not simply about reaching safety, but about understanding herself, the people around her, and the world she lived in. Each challenge had taught her something vital: patience, observation, trust, and the quiet strength found in calm action. As the sun began its slow descent, Ahuli looked across the desert horizon. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for life, for the people who had guided her, for the quiet courage she had witnessed, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. The desert had been harsh, unforgiving, and dangerous, but it had also been a teacher, shaping her into someone who understood fear, courage, and survival in a profound way. When the group finally settled for the evening, Ahuli sat near the fire feeling a quiet satisfaction. She had faced the snake bite, the storm, the mountain lion, and the challenges of the desert. She had learned to trust, to act with courage, and to guide others even when she herself had been vulnerable. She understood now that survival was not about being invincible, but about being aware, careful, and willing to accept help when needed. As night fell fully, the stars shining brightly overhead, Ahuli closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest. She felt safe, surrounded by her family and community, and strengthened by the lessons of the past days. The desert had tested her, but it had also taught her the value of trust, courage, patience, and human connection. She had survived, and in surviving, she had grown in ways she could never have imagined. In the quiet of the night, Ahuli made a promise to herself. She would carry these lessons forward, applying the courage and trust she had learned to all aspects of her life. Ahuli, she would remember the cowboy who had saved her, the desert that had tested her, and the people who had guided her. Life would continue to bring challenges, but she now knew how to face them with calm, careful action and the quiet courage that comes from understanding fear and survival. The desert was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, but it was also full of life, lessons, and quiet beauty.